Morning, y'all. It's Friday. Let's pick up on our fish here. Um, so the last part of the lecture really is a lot of taxonomy. There are a few other slides with some info. I do think, I go back and forth on the view of memory a bunch of taxonomy, but if you go on in any type of natural history field, having this basic framework of the families and orders is really important, because as you move to a new place and you learn new species of fish, you have some kind of framework to put that knowledge into, and I think that is very, very useful. So one of the biggest orders we have is the Saprophytes. Okay, these are mostly stream fishes, and they include all the minnows, so Natropus, Cyprinella, Campostoma, all the suckers, Moxostoma, Hypotylium, right, are all in this order, Saprophytes. And as an order, it's distributed all around the world, right? And including Africa, Eurasia, North America. These are the loaches, a very diverse group of Eurasian species, some really bizarre body forms, mostly benthic bottom feeders. Saprophytidae, this Saprophytidae is the family of minnows and carps. So, and you'll be familiar with these from lab. Small, silvery, lot of homoplasius body shape convergence going on here. We've got the tubercles, Somatolis, Greek chubs. These are very bizarre. They build these giant nests, and other species come and lay their eggs down inside of the rock nest too. Let's see if this will work. I'll let that spin. So you see here is one of those stone rollers that actually do carry the rocks, right? Different. Look at these Natropus, beautiful colors. Lots of variation. Cyprinella there with the big tubercles. On the breeding males, basically. And that's some kind of sexual selection thing. We talked about evolution and how these things would be maintained in the population and become more common over time. Boy, the internet is horrible today. Yeah, check this out. Okay, so the nest is this big pile of rocks down here. We see daces, we see chubs. Right, there's the builder of the nest. Right, you can see him picking up rocks, even bringing it down and building that nest. See that? Look at that. And a huge community of fish build up around this structure, because that's one limiting factor, I think, in stream systems, is a place to put your eggs, right? A lot of fish deposit their eggs down inside of the crevices between rocks, and so, and a lot of that gets filled in with silt coming in from the stream banks. So these chubs create these awesome nests, and I've seen this before, and the most beautiful fish you'll see along. That's probably the male over here. And maybe this is the female, but you see some Natropus, some Cyprinella, all different other types of fish using the structure. So anyways, I thought that's cool. See this interaction between different groups of Saprophytidae. Okay, more species. Fall fish, squawfish. I mean, all the carp are in this group. Catastomidae, these are the suckers. We're going to see a subterminal mouth. A lot of streams. If you could, all the fish in the stream and put it in a bag and weighed them, the highest amount of biomass would come from fish in this family. They tend to be pretty big. So out at the farm, when we spent some time at Shoal Creek, most of those fish are pretty small. But you'll get some of these Moxostoma duquesne, the black or spotted suckers. They get pretty sizable, and reach high levels of abundance. And that probably, think about what these things are eating. Ooze, they're eating algae, they're eating insects, right? So they're eating pretty low on the food chain, and so they can get a lot of energy to build their biomass, right? So you see the commonality here is the placement of the mouth, that sucker mouth. I think this quillback here, some kind of red horse. Very cool fish. Siluriformes is the next order of fish. These are the catfishes. Okay, a very abundant or diverse group around the world, more than 2,400. So there's probably almost as many catfish as there are amphibians in the world. Right? I think I might have misspoken there, but there's a lot. Mostly freshwater. We would see those barbels. They are basically nocturnal. Living on the bottom of the water normally, bottom of the creeks, rivers, and that's what the barbels are for. And just so many different species. Armored catfish down here on the bottom. This is some of the group that Keith has studied. There's some very large catfishes in Europe and very large catfishes in Asia. Right. The family that we have around here, Actinopterygii, includes all the catfish, bullheads. Here's those Naturus, our little mad tom, those small benthic stream fishes. Too darn cool. Highly endemic, so you'll get a different species in almost all the different river drainages in the southeast will have their own endemic group of mad toms. And probably because of this high endemicity, small range size, specializing in these beautiful high gradient, clean creeks, there many of them can be found on the endangered species list. So here's channel cats, blue cats, flat-headed catfish. There's all the different bullheads, some of these little mad toms. I think this is the one that we found, Noturus lepticanthus. Salmoniformes, another big, well, actually there's not that many species in the order, but as an order of fish, it's pretty well known. These are the salmon and trout, right? So, because they're so good for food, right, and for fishing, people know a lot about Salmoniformes. Salvelinus, these are the brook trout, Oncorhynchus rainbow salmo, or a lot of the salmon, right? A lot of them are anadromous, meaning that they breed in freshwater and live most of their life in saltwater and move back and forth for breeding. Beautiful. As a kid, this is one of those groups that just fascinating. Graylings, coho salmon, probably cutthroat, brown trout, brook trout, rainbow trout, Atlantic salmon. Yeah, very neat group. Cyprinodontiformes. Again, worldwide distribution. So when you get to these ordinal levels, these groups are old groups, and they were around when all the continents were together. And then when the continents broke up, they spread to all the way as far as, China to North America to Africa. So when you see that kind of distribution all around the world, that indicates this as a group. This order is a very old group. Where do you find them? Yes, we find fresh water, salt water, brackish water, right? And we see these. I think this is where the desert pupfish is found. That's which group it's in. They live out in the west in these little tiny springs in the middle of the desert with high salinity, lots of salt content. Fungulus, that's our studfish. Gambusias and mosquito fish, and they are animals that do eat a lot of larvae of mosquitoes and things, so people will introduce them into ponds and things to keep the mosquito level down. There's your studfish. I think that's pupfish, mosquito fish, Cyprinodontiformes. Caudidae, this is the sculpins. Freshwater. I think that there may be some marine, but largely it's freshwater group. Usually in cold water. We don't know. This is a group, this Caudus, this genus that you know, the sculpins. Taxonomically, very diverse group. It's hard to tell how many species there really are in that group. And that's why in lab it's Caudus sp, which just means it's a species within the genus Caudus. And a lot of, again, a lot of homoplasius, a lot of, I don't know if it's homoplasius or homologous, but a lot of convergence in appearances. Very similar looks that they have. Perciformes, huge order. Over 9,000 species in this one order. Okay. You recognize them because they have 2 dorsal fins. So that includes things like the basses around here, all the sunfishes, but also includes all the darters, all the percids, right? Perches, things like that. So very big group. Ecologically important. Marine, freshwater, find them in aquaria. I think about things like groupers and these big pet fish like that are important for sport fishing too. So, I mean, geez, half of these I don't even really know. This is, I think this is your snakehead though, Garrison. It's peacock bass. A lot of these, you know, I think this triggerfish, I don't know, doesn't really matter, but swordfishes, crevasse, barracudas, snook, groupers, mahi-mahi, tuna, right? What's this, a cobia, I think? Amazing diversity, all these perciformes. Okay, within the perciformes, we get the centrarchids. These are our basses and crappies and sunfishes. So would be Pomoxis, Lepomus, and Micropterus are all in this group. All right. And we see, right, a pattern. We see the Naturalis are mostly imperiled because they live in one type of habitat. But if you think about things like a crappie and a largemouth bass and a bluegill, are not really imperiled, generally speaking, because you can go to the crappiest looking golf course in, you know, Gwinnett County, and no offense to Gwinnett County, but it's not known for its ecological integrity, and you're going to find some kind of centrarchid living in there, right? They just are very tolerant to low oxygen, high siltation, right? They are survivors. Percids, on the other hand, right? These are, I think a lot of these are benthic invertebrores. They are living in creeks, and they need that substrate on the bottom. These are the larger ones. This is more from where I'm from, the walleye and the yellow perch here. These live in big rivers and in lakes, right? But here we're looking at some of these darters, small streams, right? They live in fast-flowing, high gradient streams. So having that swim bladder that keeps you high in the water column is not really, it's not that it's not positive, it actually would be a hindrance because you'd be floating away all the time, right? We see lots and lots of species, lots of endemic species of Ethiostoma persina, particularly Ethiostoma. So lots of conservation issues surrounding Ethiostoma. So for here locally we have the Cherokee and the Etowah darters, which are both, I think they're both federally listed species, right? Because they are evolve quickly, they so they're speciate quickly. So here are the persina. This is a probably Cathay nigrofasciata. Some Ethiostoma. I mean, look at the colors on these things. Some more persina. This is the amber darter. found in the Conosaga, federally protected species. This is the Ethiostoma here. This may be, I don't know. I get lost with the darters. Okay, so there's some taxonomy. Now we're going to kind of talk about some general trends with fishes and their evolution and their ecology. So some cool trends, right? So we say in freshwater, fish, particularly in the creeks, fish attach their eggs to something. And I was kind of blown away to realize this, so say in the Shoal Creek that we went in, fish may turn sideways and attach their egg inside of a crack in the rocks. They may flip upside down and attach their eggs inside of a crevice in the bottom of a log. They do maybe spawn in the rock nests, right? Marine fish tend to have pelagic eggs, and pelagic basically means that the eggs are just floating in the water, or they're not attached, they're just on the bottom or something like that. Some adaptations to deep sea habitats. I see this amazing bioluminescence, and that comes in all different forms. You can have bioluminescent fish that have a little, they maybe have a little pouch that hosts a bioluminescent species of bacteria in there, or it could be that the fish itself produces the bioluminescence. There's actually some fish that have both, right? Skeletal modifications associated with the pressure of living in the deep sea. Could be a lack of calcium down there too. See these gigantic wide jaws, teeth. Probably think about that. That would be maybe adaptation to the low prey base and infrequent feeding opportunities. And so when you get the opportunity to eat, you're going to eat the biggest thing you possibly can, right? And almost any habitat you go into, Keith has talked about this, some creek in Alabama, that if you go during the daytime, you will never catch this one type of fish, but if you go at nighttime, they're plentiful. So it's almost like they just are partitioning the niches in the creek by saying, okay, you are active in the diurnal niche, and I'm a nocturnal niche, and not competing with each other at all there. Okay, some patterns in body shape and movement, locomotion. Then the trade-offs here are things like precision. So how can you move exactly where you want to? It's about efficiency, and it's about speed. Okay, so you can take the eel, something like the not so much the hagfish, because they don't even have paired fins, but American eels or moray eels that are in marine, and they move in an undulation, and it's very efficient. They don't burn a lot of calories when they do move, but it's not very precise, or it's not very fast. If you have something like a bass or a deep-bodied fish, the latter half of the body moves as side to side, laterally, and rather than the whole body moving in a sinuous curve. This is basically related to speed. So if you need a short burst of speed, then that's the best way to do it. And then the very fastest fish are the ones that not the back half of the body moves, but just the caudal peduncle moves. So some examples here, right? The American eel, again, this is the sinuous undulations. A lot of our fish here, like this is probably some kind of a crappie. And a lot of the minnows, so basically the last half of the body moves, and they're pretty fast. And then you get into these, this is I think a mackerel or some kingfish maybe. And in this esox, this is a pickerel or a pike. And these guys lay in wait, and they have explosive speed for a short distance, and by basically moving just the latter part of their body, their caudal peduncle. Take this, some kind of pufferfish here. They don't rely much on their caudal fin, but rather they use their pectoral, anal, and or pelvic fins. And seahorses are another good example of this. If you watch a seahorse moving, they basically just have their little pectoral fins spinning, gyrating, and it helps them to move in a precise way. But they're certainly not very fast fish. Okay. And then you get these really interesting modifications. Like I don't know if you guys have ever been on a boat to see flying fish, but it honestly blew my mind when I saw them. It was actually 9/11, the day that 9/11 happened. What was that, 19 years ago? I was on a deep sea boat in the Caribbean and watched these things, and they fly so far. They fly using their pectoral fins as a wing, right? Creates lift, and they just basically dance across the top of the water for a good 100 feet. Unbelievable. Look at that. Biodiversity, just mind-boggling. So I don't know what that's about. If it's about escaping a marlin that's underwater, or it's just a more efficient. You think you'd have less friction in the air than you would in the water. So arguably it should be less. It should be more efficient to fly than it would be to swim, right? Because you're not getting so much drag in the air as you would in the water. But damn it, that's cool, isn't it? Yeah. So I gotta stop watching that. I'll be here all day. Okay. Yeah, and then you get things like these walking shark. You can just do a Google search on that, but or look at this. What are these, like frogfishes? And oh my God, look at these fins. They look like little legs on them. Right? Okay, fish feeding adaptations. We've talked about this a lot in lab, about you have the inferior mouth that's up, subterminal, right at the end. Well, no, okay, I'm sorry. Inferior is on the bottom. Those are like the catastomids. Subterminal is just below the apex or the tip of the body. Terminal's at the tip, and then superior's at the top. And that depends, again, it's all about specializing on the type of food that you eat in order to compete with all the other fish that are in the creek. Okay, and where that food is that you specialize on. Pharyngeal teeth, I'm going to come back to this, but this is beyond cool, right? So these are these large crushing plates that are found in the pharynx of the fish, right? So this is a freshwater drum. When you open their mouth, they do have teeth here on their maxillary, premaxillary, but back here in the pharynx, behind the gill slits, are these crushing plates. What in the world is that? Okay, so we have, here they are, right? Here's the mouth, here's the pharynx. Esophagus goes back here. We have these crushing plates, muscles that help to masticate and grind up their food. So drums, I don't know, I was just talking to Keith about whether drums lived in the Etowah or not, but they are really unique fish. They're big. They use their swim bladder to make like audible noises. They have pharyngeal crushing teeth. They eat bivalves. So imagine they eat one of those big bivalves like we saw out at the farm, and they suddenly have these crushing pharyngeal teeth to break open that bivalve. right? Very, very cool stuff. Jaw teeth. So these canine teeth can be fused into crushing plates, right? So we can see that in the parrotfish. Okay, parrotfish actually eat coral, and they say a lot of sand comes from the action of fish like coalfish scraping off coral, crunching up the coral, the hard exoskeleton, the skeleton of the coral, and then spitting it out. Right. So again, we see inferior mouth placement, and then we see the superior. Here's again that mosquito fish. There's this thing called the archer fish that goes to the top of the water and squirts a little jet of water up and knocks prey off of branches down into the water and then eats them. Yeah, can't make this stuff up. So why are there so many fish, right? Almost half of vertebrates are fishes. Why are there so many? And so here's some of the interesting hypotheses, and they probably all contribute to this, right? One is there's a lot of water, okay, so lots of habitat, and that water has been there in some form or fashion since life has been here. Life arose in the ocean, right? But yet, between all the marine habitats and then all the freshwater habitats, there's a ton of different micro or meso habitats, that riffles, pools, big rivers, little rivers, springs, ponds, lakes, tidal areas, brackish areas, so many different habitats that allow for specialization, which tends to promote diversity. And you get these amazing adaptations that we've been looking at some of these things, and those really do spur diversity too, because if your anatomy can change to specialize on your food source or your habitat, then that's going to tend to promote speciation. So the oceans are pretty stable, but freshwater habitats are not, and so we see these vicariant events where streams change course, and one stream becomes two. You get lots of changes. Ponds dry up, become two different ponds. Take one population, split it into two. When we talked about speciation, that's really what we're talking about, is taking one group and splitting it into two. And once they become geographically or spatially isolated, then genetic isolation is sure to follow, right? And then fish are very big on sexual selection, and organisms that are strongly sexual selected, that also tends to promote speciation, because any type of, remember, speciation is just about reproductive isolation. It goes down to breeding choice. And so if something changes about the breeding system, and two groups that were used to be together become separated, then by nature that is a new species. Okay, so all these things have combined, and then of course this bullet here, been around since the Cretaceous. That's important, because what that means is there has been more time to accumulate new species of fish. Okay. Some overall lessons, right? We see this connection, form and function. We see the morphology of their form is related to their function and what they eat and their ecology and their niche, right? Their trophic ecology. The mode of locomotion reflects their ecology and reflects their habitat. The power of vicariance in terms of promoting speciation, and then also sexual selection. And then from the conservation standpoint, lots of interesting case studies within the fish group that we can look at overexploitation and what type of fish are more likely to be exploited, and how that leads to population declines or not, depending on the biology of the species. We talk about sharks, about how they are really prone to population declines because they do not reproduce quickly. Something like rabbits, you can hunt almost all the rabbits out of an area, but they reproduce at a young age. They reproduce multiple times in a year, and they produce a lot of offspring when they reproduce. So that's a recipe for a pretty resilient animal. Something like a shark, you knock the populations down, then they have to grow to be pretty old in order to reproduce. When they do reproduce, they only maybe reproduce once every year or two, and when they do reproduce, they only produce a couple offspring. Right? So the biology is affected to related to their conservation. Okay, and so here is some info about their conservation. You could almost predict whether a fish is going to be, if you knew about their life history and their ecology, you can predict whether a fish is likely to become imperiled, right? Obviously, overfishing. If the fish is big enough, right, then they will become a target for food. If the fish is a schooling fish, or they aggregate in dense congregations, they're going to become a target because just economics. If you can pull a trawl net through a given area and pull in 10 fish versus 1, that's going to become a target. Again, biology. Do they mature late? Lower fecundity means they produce few eggs or few babies if they're oviparous or ovoviviparous. Feeding high in the food chain. So again, we talked about suckers have very high biomass because they have a lot of food available to them. Something like maybe a bass or a pike or something like that are much less. There's much less biomass in a given stream of those top predators, because by the time you go from the algae to maybe a small minnow to a large minnow to a medium-sized fish to a large fish, every transfer trophically, every time you move up the food chain, you lose something like 90% of the energy, just because by the nature of thermodynamics, right? So things like a perfect example of this for overfishing are the tuna, right? Large bluefin tuna are becoming some people, I've heard people say that they're like a tiger of the oceans, right? They're huge. They school. They don't mature until a later age, and they are top predators. And so these are just, again, they're basically screwed. Habitat degradation will tend to imperil a species if that species only lives in a small, narrow range. So that's just kind of all eggs in one basket. If say you happen to live in a watershed that just by, accident of history becomes a really hot place to live and all the people move there, right? That is going to imperil you. If you're specialized in a habitat, there's some species, I think it's called a blue shiner or blue chub, that they don't live in the creek. They only live in these little fishless, or they only live in these little ponds that form when the water floods and then retreats, and they leave these little ponds on the side of the creek. Super specialized. And so those habitats are just more likely to disappear, and then in that case you have no backup plan because you're so specialized. Same thing with food and breeding, right? If you only eat a specific picky thing, if you only lay your eggs in a very specific picky area, then if that area or that food disappears, then you're by nature endangered. And a lot of those things, these particularly, I guess, the habitat degradation, right? that the perfect storm can really be seen here in the Etowah, right? We have 8 threatened and endangered species here in, well, this is all Georgia, right? But in Georgia, probably the some of the hot spots are in the Etowah and the Conasauga River. And so what's the problem? A lot of it, I would say, is, damming, like Altoona, and there's a lot of these little smaller impoundments. Like, even I would put Klein Lake out at Dr. Flint's place on this list. Shoal Creek is an amazing creek. We see some animals there that we don't find anywhere else in Cherokee County or anywhere else in North Georgia, really. And I would venture a guess that if the dam wasn't there, that Shoal Creek would be nice all the way up through there. But the other really big problem, probably on a grander scale, is this idea of siltation, right? So if you build a house, you have to grade, you have to expose the soil, you get the rain, the silt washes down to smaller and smaller, bigger and bigger creeks, and then eventually silts up these places like the Etowah. Logging, channelization, all these things are affecting the habitat of fishes in the Etowah. So this kind of it's a great map. I love this. We are, here's the Etowah, here's Alatoona. And I guess this must be Shoal Creek here. Okay. But the Etowah starts up around Dahlonega, Dawson County, flows down through Ball Ground, Canton, Alatoona, Cartersville, flows over to Rome, through Cass, all these places. And then the Coosawhattie and the Conasauga form the Oostanala, and then the Oostanala and the Etowah form the Coosa, and then the Coosa flows over into Alabama, eventually making it to the Mobile Bay. Okay, and in the Upper Coosa, we see the Coosa mad tom. That's a species of Naturus. The Cherokee darter, amber darter, holiday darter, goldline darter, Etowah darter, all found only in these systems in the world. Right, blue shiner, Coosa shiner, Conasauga log perch. All right, these are ancient rivers. I've seen some papers that showed that the snail species that live in the Etowah, their genetics indicate that they have been in those systems and evolving relatively little since before the dinosaurs existed here, right? So these are ancient systems and have had a lot of time to build up this amazing diversity of fishes. So, all right, folks, that's it. I'm going to post this now, and hope you all have a good weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.